the Father's name Yahweh. Restoring the Messiah's name Yahshua. Re-establishing Torah covenant. Preparing the bride. The revealing of the sons of Elohim. Prophecy. The return of Melchizedek, the royal priesthood. Elijah's school of the prophets. The Way Ministries. A return to the Philadelphian spirit.
Okay, let's go ahead and open up in prayer. Abba, Father, Holy Abba, the great Elohim, the Most High, we thank you, Abba. We praise you, we glorify you, we lift you up and magnify you for your goodness, your kindness, your mercy, and your compassion. Abba, Father, we invite you to visit us today. We invite you, Abba, to bring your spirit, your anointing here, that your word may come alive, Abba, as rivers of flowing water, that they may flow through each and every person here, Abba, and those who will hear this later, that it may encourage them and strengthen them to realize that there is a day after today, Abba, that there is hope, that there is a way out of our own circumstances that we find ourselves in, if we will so take the challenge on, Abba, and believe wholeheartedly and in faith, completely, divesting ourselves of any doubt, that you are capable and that Yahshua has the capacity by his blood and his righteousness working through our circumstances with our cooperation, that we can prevail and we can be more than conquerors in Yahshua HaMashiach. It is my prayer, Abba, it is my supplication that this message will go forth and will encourage, but also will challenge and enlighten, Abba, and take us up to another level, a level in which we can find more freedom, more faith, that we will go from faith to faith and from glory to glory, that you and Messiah Yahshua will get the full credit for your capability and your capacity to take us one step at a time, not a miracle all at once, but one step at a time, and each step will be a miracle, because we believe, Abba, that you are able to finish the work that you have started inside of us. So we thank you and we bless you in Yahshua's mighty name. Amen.
Amen.
Okay. So this message is something I've been thinking about for a little while. And it really comes down to, in essence, really challenging ourselves in our lives and not settling for the fact that things have to stay the way they are. But if Yahweh so chooses to allow it to stay the way it is for a period of time, that we're okay with that. And it's about getting to that place. It's about getting to a place where you're not anxious for just anything, but you're content, even with the trial and the sufferings and the disappointments of maybe what you're going through at this present time. And so the challenge is not the challenge itself as far as the circumstances that exist in your life. The challenge really is getting a grip on yourself. That's what it really comes down to. And it's when you don't get a grip on yourself that your imagination starts running wild and things start blowing up beyond their measured proportion that Yahweh has dealt into your circumstances. And so we many times are our own worst enemies, because we make it through our perception to be far worse than what it really is. So in essence, what are we doing? We kind of create our own demons that don't actually exist. So we're not only fighting the demonic realm, We're fighting our own internal demons that create these kinds of problems in our lives as well. So today's message is, what meaning are you applying to your life? What meaning are you applying to your life? In Matthew chapter 9, verse 29, it says, "Let it happen then, just as according to how you believe." So if you believe that whatever is happening to you is supposed to happen to you because you deserve it, and you have low self-esteem, and you may have brought it on yourself, or so, then it's going to be, that reality is going to exist in your life, where in reality, in the spirit realm, that may not actually be what's actually going on at all. But it's your perception based upon how you see yourself, which is always through a cloud. We really don't see ourselves very well. We don't see ourselves very accurately. But the exercise in this message is to try to draw out a deeper understanding and a deeper meaning of who just you really are, and how to get a grip on yourself, and to give you some tools to help you bring things back into sharp focus and not out of focus. This is very, very important. If we look in 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5, 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5, it says, "Now, casting down as demolishing with violence imaginations." Casting down as demolishing with violence imaginations. This is one of the biggest things, not even in the body of Messiah, but even out there in the world. People imagine a lot of things that really don't exist, but in their realm of reality, that is the reality they've created for themselves. So they will, it's like I said before, your behavior cannot operate independently of your identity. Your behavior cannot operate independently of your identity. Whatever your identity is, and if it says, this is my reality and what I'm going through right now, then that imagination will cause that reality in your life. And you will fill the empty blanks in the circumstances to justify why it is the way it is, when if you could actually go speak to the Father would say, it's nothing of the sort. You have been deceived. You have concocted something and bamboozled yourself into a reality that really does not exist. So, if we're going to be functioning in this body of Messiah, I'm speaking in general terms, the best way that you can really function in accuracy is be truthful with yourself, and don't be afraid of delving into areas within yourself where you can challenge the so-called vain imaginations that you may have concocted for yourself. Or sometimes it's a little bit of truth and a little bit of lie mixed together. And so sometimes it gets a little tricky to get in there and separate the truth from the lie. But if you're really sick and tired of being sick and tired of being held in bondage with this state of mind and state of spirit that you find yourself in as like a revolving door, it just visits you on a regular basis and doesn't ever go away, when you get to that point, then you'll deal with it. Until then, you'll continue to accept the circumstances for what they are in your life. My hope and my desire through this message is not only to give you some tools to challenge that, and to bring it to recognition when you're faced with a situation so that you can use these concepts as metaphors to help you, but it's also to be able to go beyond that and implant that deeply in your spirit to the point where you cannot go back and revisit that anymore. Because there's nothing that drives me more crazy than revisiting the same circumstances over and over again, and they don't ever go away. Now, if Yahweh says, I'm keeping it there for a reason, like he did with the Apostle Shaul, where he had an affliction in his stomach, there ain't nothing you're going to be able to do about that. And it ain't even going to make any sense to even complain about it, because Yahweh has that there to buffer you, to keep you under control, that you don't get outside your measure. And it's human nature to want to exalt itself above the measure that's been given to it. And this is something that we all must always recognize when ourselves, that you never go above and beyond what has been given to you. Expect more, but don't take the privilege on yourself. It's kind of like sometimes my grandson comes to my house and he'll come and take my glass of ice water and my organic popcorn. And, you know, I kind of let him do it, but he's kind of taken a privilege that he really hasn't had, you know. But he's my grandson, and kind of whatever is mine is his anyway. And it's a little game that we play, and that's okay, because that makes him have fun. But the point is that sometimes we like to take things that don't really belong to us. So if Yahweh is not giving you something, don't step out and try to take it. So let's move on here. And every high thing, and that high thing is that is a barrier. It's designed to be a barrier that exalts itself against the knowledge of Elohim and bringing into captivity every thought from perception to the obedience of Messiah. So right away we're being told that we need to bring every thought into captivity. And yet that is so often something that we fail in, because there's always something inside of us down deep that's always trying to keep that thought there, because it has a root, it has a connection, it has an emotional connection to it that satisfies the flesh. And yet it's that very flesh that Yahweh wants us to crucify. And yet it's hard to crucify it when that implanted concept is constantly there all the time, nagging at you and pushing you and prompting you to jump out there and respond to that stimulus that has been put in front of you. And so I say to myself at a certain point in my life, I said, I've had enough of this. I've just had enough. This thing has plagued me ever since I was a child, and it bothers me and bothers me and bothers me. I said, I've had enough. And I finally decided that this is not going to bother me anymore. And really what it comes down to is it comes down to a decision. Have you had enough? And if you haven't, and you haven't had that dialogue with yourself, then be my guest. You can continue to punish yourself, because that's what's going to happen. This thing is going to be a revolving door that just keeps coming around and around and around, and it won't ever leave you alone. So I ask you, what meaning, in this particular time in your life, what meaning are you applying to your life in regards to the circumstances that you find yourself in that seem to be reoccurring and are constantly frustrating you over and over again? And it seems like you just can't get that monkey off your back. What meanings are you applying to those events in your life or event? And so what I would say is that in hope that the past does not compel you to have to live the future in the same way. The past does not have to. Now, if you say to yourself as an affirmation, this is the way I am, this is the way I'm always going to be, you've already sealed yourself. Because what did the scripture says? Let it be unto you according to how you believe. So if you believe in your identity, that you were made this way, and this is the way you're supposed to stay, then you have become Yahweh in your life. And no new destiny can be written for you. You will continue to fulfill this self-sabotaging defeat that's going on in your life all the time, on a daily basis, weekly, monthly, yearly, whatever the case is. So let's take a look at a positive example about this. In 1 Chronicles chapter 4, verse 9 through 10, 1 Chronicles chapter 4, verses 9, is a short story here about Jabez, or Habaz. And this is a person who could have went through life a different way, but he chose to extract the meaning from his life and change the meaning of his life from one circumstance, a negative one, into a positive one. So let's read. Now Jabez, and that means to grieve and be sorrowful. That's what his name is. His mother gave him that name. Was more honorable than his brothers. And his mother called his name Jabez, saying, because I bore him in pain. So here's a man that from the time he's born, even I would say before that, his mother was in pain and in sorrow in mind, body, and spirit about this child. And so even before coming out of this world, his destiny was already set. Now he could have decided that it was going to stay that way because even my mother didn't have any faith that I could be something different. But let's read on in verse 10. And Jabez called on Elohim of Israel, saying, "Oh, that you would bless me indeed and enlarge my territory." How many of us decide to do that? How many of us really go before Yahweh and say, you know what? I've had enough of this. I can't take this anymore. This has got to change. If it's your will that it stays for a little while longer, I'll accept that, Abba Father. But right now, I'm praying in faith, believing that my life couldn't possibly be designed to be like this for the rest of my life. And so you are Yahweh of change. You're a Yahweh that changes character, changes personality, changes spiritual state. You are a Yahweh that heals. And if you can do it for somebody else, I believe you can do it for me. I don't know how you can do it. I don't know when you can do it. I'm just simply saying within myself, I don't have the resources to do this, but I'm believing by faith that you will do these things. And I'm putting you to the test because your word, in your word, you always say, put me to the test. So I'm putting you to the test. Is your word true or is it not true? This is your opportunity to show me what you can do in my life. And I'm ready to go on that road. I'm ready to be honest with myself. From the time I was in my mother's womb, this is what I was going to be, but I'm believing it can change. I don't have to settle for this. As a matter of fact, I believe that I was brought into this world because for this very moment, to show that you are Yahweh, you are the Most High, and you can do these incredible things in my life. You can do it. And it ain't my faith that's saying that right now. I believe you bred me for this circumstance so that that word that's in the spirit realm, you put it into my spirit and it's making my mouth open up and your word is just being reflected right back at you. So that other people can read this story and see that things can change. The past does not have to equal the future. It's not guaranteed that it is. And enlarge my territory, that your hand would be with me, and that you would keep me from evil, that I may not cause pain. So Elohim granted him what he requested. So if he can do it for Jabez, he can do it for you. But what happens is we get so used to living in this flesh with the disappointments and the trials and all the other things that goes on in our life that we've resigned ourselves to accept it for just as it is. That is the standard. That's the way it's always been. And that's probably just the way it's going to be. Just accept it and succumb to it. But he chose not to do that. So if he could choose not to do it, then we can do the same. We have these limiting beliefs. And what I'm asking you today is to challenge your limiting beliefs. Stop playing into the limiting beliefs. Because when we do that, we're basically saying, Yahweh, I'm putting you into a box. And the box is 12 by 12 by 12, and you cannot be any bigger than that box. That's not for us to do. And that's not a life of faith. And that's not a life of change. It's a life of stagnancy, stagnation, putrefaction, rottingness. That's what it is. And you're never going to be truly happy unless you see things start to happen in your life and things begin to move out of the way. Mountains that have been there your whole life begin to start to move. That's when change starts to happen. That's when joy and happiness starts to really happen. But you can't play idle in this process. It is a process. You cannot be idle. You cannot be stagnant. You cannot be regressing backwards. You must play an active role in saying to Yahweh, I'm ready to step up to the plate. Show me what you're going to do. Because I don't want to do this anymore. Let's look at a negative concept of this. In Mark chapter 10, verse 17, Mark chapter 10, verse 17, sometimes you got to give up something to get something back. But if you're not willing to give up what you got in your hand, Yahweh can't impart to you what it is He wants to give you. And so you'll never realize what that is because you're unwilling to let your hand loose. Verse 17, now as he was going on the road, one came running, knelt before him, and asked him, Good teacher, what shall I do that I may inherit as an heir eternal life? So Yahshua said to him, Why do you call me good? No one is good but one, that is Elohim. You know the commandments. Do not commit adultery. Do not murder. Do not steal. Do not bear false witness. Do not defraud. Honor your father and mother. And he answered and said to him in verse 20, Teacher, all these things I have kept and guarded from my youth. Then Yahshua, looking at him, loved him and said to him, One thing you lack and fall short of. Go your way, sell whatever you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure, a deposit of wealth in heaven, and come, take up the cross and follow me. But he was sad at this word and went away sorrowful, for he had great possessions. Now, in this case, we're talking about a story here where this man had physical wealth. But it's not limited to that. Because what do you have in your possession that you're not willing to give up from your flesh? I'm not talking about wealth. I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about this burden that you got, this demonic stronghold that has plagued you, maybe even from the time you were born. Maybe it's a generational curse that's followed you from many generations. You possess that. You hold on to it. Only you have the power to decide whether you let it go or you continue to hold on to it. You have that power. The question is this. Before you can even get to that point, do you have the guts and the fortitude to go inside yourself and search and see what it is that you're holding on to in the subconscious level that your conscious level isn't even quite aware of? To do that, you need Yahweh to reveal that which is hidden in the secret place in your subconscious mind. Are you scared to do that? If you are, you'll continue to live with it the rest of your life. So this is kind of easy in a way because it's evident the man has money. He could just simply go to the bank, withdraw the money, and give it away. That would be easy. I'm not talking about the easy stuff. I'm talking about the deep things that are deep unto deep, recessed down inside the core of your spirit that drives you to do the things that you do, that you're too damn afraid to go and investigate. That's the ones I'm talking about. Because some of them take years to root out of you. But you got to have the courage to want to go in and be honest with yourself and say, yeah, I don't know what it is, but I know there's a root in there somewhere of something, and I want to go on a trip and I want to investigate what this is. And then once I have a knowledge of it, I again can pray with understanding against this thing. But you got to have the guts to want to face yourself. And that's where I find most people will not go. Because it scares the living daylights out of them. They don't want to know the unknown. For that, there's nothing I can do. There's nothing that Yahweh can do. If you're stagnant in that place, that's where you're going to stay. That's your privilege and your right in a certain context. So, let's look at the next concept. This is important. They're all important, but let's zone in on this one. It's not the event. It's what you do with the event that shapes the quality of your life. Ponder that. It's not the event. It's what we do with the event that shapes the quality of your life, or potentially can shape the quality of your life. Because you can choose to look at the event in a negative side and get a totally different set of results. Case in point, 2 women get raped, violently raped. Didn't ask for it. Both went through exactly the same experience. One of them goes into drugs, alcoholism, rehab, all this stuff the rest of her life, never remarries, stays dysfunctional, health goes down the tubes, you know the story. And then you have the other woman who goes and starts an organization and helps women who've been battered and raped and helps them get back on their feet, and it gives them counseling and all that. What's the difference between these 2 women? They both had the same event. So what is the difference? The difference is that one chose to use the event and evaluate a purpose that she could extract out of it differently than the other woman. One did not have the advantage over the other in regards to the event. It's just one chose to take a proactive response to the event and the other one didn't. And how often we do that when we are faced with things in our lives, that we look at it and we perceive what we're dealing with and we decide, I'm going to deal with it from a negative side, not a proactive one. I don't see this as an opportunity for positive. I see this as an opportunity for negative. Why? Because I see myself this way. This is the way I've always been, and it never changes, and it's never going to change, and so I'm just going to respond to it in that way. But your past doesn't have to equal the future. And so for one of those women, she changed her future. She changed her destiny. It was a choice. It's a decision. See, the body of Messiah is messed up. And the reason why it's messed up is because we're making it too complicated. We really are. They're making it too complicated. I talk about a lot of complex stuff when I give messages. But the bottom line is, it's really not complicated. It really isn't. It's very simple, and I'll say it like this. When you are tired and you're wore out and you don't want to suffer the negative consequences of this cycle of defeat that keeps going in and out of your life on a daily basis, and you're in a rut and you can't seem to get out of the mud and your tires are spinning in the mud all the time, and when you're tired of that and you're convicted that something must change. See, in our lives we have the should-haves and the must. We all have our columns. I should go on a cruise. I should go out to a nice restaurant with my husband or my wife. I should go exercise. You know, these are the shoulds, but we have a list that's called a must. The question is, do you move that should-have to the must column? I am tired of this. I will not tolerate another day, Yahweh. It must change. Because I am not going to my grave in this state and then have to come up in a resurrection and stand in front of you and you point your finger at me and say, why, when you had the time to deal with this, you chose not to deal with it? I don't want to be in that position. I know I'm going to get some fingers at me because there's some things that I probably won't get to fully. But my point is that this needs to be a must. If it's not a must, you will continue. So what am I saying? It comes down to a decision. That's all it is in the body of Messiah, is just a decision. I'm tired or I'm not tired. A change must happen or a change is not going to happen. It should change. Maybe it'll change. It could change. But a must, I can endure more punishment before I get to that point. Okay, so be a glutton for punishment. Be unto you according to how you believe. Your belief will dictate what your destiny is going to be. And if you've relegated yourself to the fact that this is okay with you, you don't like it, it's aggravating, it's a pain in the neck, blah, 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 and you murmur and you complain, which Yahweh don't like that either, that's another one that's tacked on top, piggybacking on top of the original problem. See, what it does is it sends you down the river with a whole bunch of other set of circumstances and negative consequences that go along with it because you allow it to stay rooted in your life. It's a decision. You decide. It stays or it doesn't stay. So, it's not the event, it's what we do with the event that shapes the quality of your life. Let's take a look at a positive example in Luke chapter 19. Luke chapter 19. And starting in verse 1. It's about opportunity. These things happen to us because it's an opportunity to demonstrate the power of Yahweh and His Ruach working in our life to overturn the strongholds that holds us down, that keeps us from prospering in mind, body, soul, spirit, finances, relationships, every which way. So in verse 1 it says, Then Yahshua entered and passed through Jericho. Now, behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus, who was a chief tax collector, and he was rich. He sought with the purpose of worshiping and to see who Yahshua was, but could not because of the crowd, for he was short in stature. So he ran ahead. Now, what we're also getting from this story is, it's about being resourceful. Sometimes you're faced with situations in your life in which it seems like you hit a wall and you can't go any further. This man hit a metaphorical wall in the sense it was a bunch of human beings that he couldn't get through, and he was a short man. But he was resourceful. Resourcefulness is a tool to help you find a way when there seems like there is no way. The question is, what is your focus? Do you want to get to the Messiah, or do you not want to get to the Messiah? He was hell-bent on making sure he could get to the Messiah. So he was resourceful. So he ran and climbed up into a sycamore fig tree to see him, for he was going to pass that way. And when Yahshua came to the place, he looked up and saw him and said, Zacchaeus, make haste and come down, for today I must stay at your house. Wow, look at the set of results he got from that. When it looked like there was no way, now there's a way, and he's got a confirmation from the Messiah himself that he made the right choice. It changed his circumstances. Why? Because in the desire of his heart, as I was reading in the Greek there, that he came with the idea that he wanted to worship him. Yet he couldn't see him. What is your driving motivation? When you're faced with an obstacle, do you decide that, I'll just succumb to the obstacle and I won't look for a resourceful way to get around this? It's like the woman with the issue of blood for 12 years. She barrels through a crowd of men illegally from Torah. She's contaminating every one of those men and goes up and grabs the seats of Yahshua, contaminating, well, supposedly, theoretically contaminating him, which was not the case. And she got healed. Yahweh blessed her with violating the Torah. Think about that. She violated the Torah and Yahweh blessed her. Now that's a concept you ain't going to hear too much about. Violate the Torah and get blessed? Oh yeah, there's a lot of places where you can violate Torah and get blessed. And there's a lot of places where you can violate the Torah and get cursed. Or, I would even say it this way, there's a lot of places where you can honor parts of the Torah and get cursed. How about that for a paradigm shift? We think we got the Torah and the Messiah in a box, and we can measure it up, and we know its dimensions, and we got it all figured out. And we don't have it figured out. Here's a case where this woman got blessed for violating Torah. She was ceremonially unclean. But that's not my point. Let's move on. Okay. And when Yahshua came down to the place, he looked up and saw him and said, Zacchaeus, make haste, come down, for today I must stay at your house. Verse 6. So he made haste and came down and received under his roof with hospitality of him joyfully. He got blessed. He wasn't going to stand for this man walking by in the street and he's not going to get to meet his date with destiny. He had a date with destiny. He had a vision. He had a passion. He had a desire. And he was going to make sure it was fulfilled. And it was. But when they saw it, they all complained, saying he has gone to be a guest with a man who is a sinner. So they classified this man as a sinner. Now, as we go through this text, we're going to start to see that these are all false accusations. Gossip, rumor, innuendo. He was being lied against. It's character assassination. Let's move on. Verse 8. Then Zacchaeus stood and said to the master, "Look, master, I give half of my goods to the poor." How many of us can say we give half of our possessions to the poor? Not many. I can't say half. I give a good amount, but I don't give a half. And if I have taken anything from anyone by false accusation, I restore it 4 times over. Wow. This is a man of character now. If you're a person of character and a person of integrity, and you have this mindset where you're pursuing and chasing after Yahweh, David did that. And Yahweh said, David is a man after my own heart. Because David was chasing Yahweh. He was constantly chasing Yahweh. He wanted to know more about Yahweh and what Yahweh could do for him in his life. So, when these things happen in our lives, are you chasing Yahweh like Zacchaeus chased Yahshua in the streets to get his reward? You must be unstoppable until you break through all of the barriers and all the strongholds to get to what it is you want. It's not the event. It's what you choose to interpret the event that determines the quality of your life. It's not the event. We spend too much time complaining about the event and not changing the circumstances of the event. Our focus is wrong. You're looking at the physical manifestation of something that's designed to draw a response from the flesh. When it's not the flesh that Yahweh's seeking a response from. Yahweh's seeking a response from the Spirit inside you, not the flesh. The flesh will never give to Yahweh something satisfactory. Let's move on. And verse 9, and Yahshua said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because he also is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which was lost." So it's not the event. Stop putting emphasis on the event. Instead of look at that, look at the event as an opportunity to change your circumstances. We've misinterpreted through our imagination what the meaning of the event is. And I always try to come back to Yahweh does not allow these things to happen in my life unless He allows them. It can't happen unless He gives His approval. So when I get hit with an emergency, something that happens, the first thing I try to do is compose myself and bring my flesh under control and say, "Abba, Father, obviously this is happening because you have allowed it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be witnessing it right now. Question is, what do you want me to do in response to this, if anything?" If you don't go through that process, your flesh will respond. And your flesh will then get you into trouble. And then you're going to start eating crows, and you're going to have feathers coming out of your mouth. So it's not the event, it's what we do with the event that shapes the quality of your life. That's what it really comes down to. Let's look at a negative response to this. In Luke chapter 19. Luke chapter 19, verse 12. It says, "Therefore he said, a certain nobleman, well-born and generous ranking, went to a far country to receive for himself a kingdom and to return. So he called 10 of his servants, delivered to them 10 minas, and said to them, do business till I come. But his citizens hated him and sent a delegation of ambassadors after him, saying, we will not have this man reign over us. And so it was, when he returned, having received the kingdom, he then commanded these servants, to whom he had given the money, to be called to him, that he might know how much every man had gained by trading. Then another came, saying, Master, here's your mina, which I have kept put away in a handkerchief. And what's interesting is, this handkerchief specifically means used for binding the face of a corpse. Now, in light of what that word means, handkerchief, it's interesting to see what the destiny of this man is for not choosing to look at the event in a different way, in a proactive way. For I feared you, because you are an austere man. You collect what you did not deposit, and reap what you did not sow. And he said to him, out of your own mouth I will judge you, you wicked servant. You knew that I was an austere man, collecting what I did not deposit, and reaping what I did not sow. Why then did you not put my money in the bank, that at my coming I might have collected it with interest? And he said to those who stood by, take the mina from him, and give it to him who has 10 minas. But they said to him, Master, he has 10 minas. For I say to you, that to everyone who has to everyone who has will be given, and from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away from him. Bring here those enemies of mine who did not want me to reign over them, and slay them before me. Two different events. One chose to see it in a proactive manner and got a different set of results, and the other one chose to look at it from a negative perspective. Two different characters of human beings we're dealing with here. One sees it through one set of eyes, and another one sees it through a different set of eyes. It's all in how you see the event. Do you even question, why am I looking at this event from this particular perspective? If you haven't even got to that point, you're going to be totally dysfunctional in the body of Messiah and your relationship with Yahweh. And Yahweh's just going to keep shaking his head over and over again. When do we learn? And what I'm saying is, like I said before, it's simple. It's a decision. Can we in the body of Messiah please make a decision? I've had enough. Because Revelation says at some point, the bride says, I have made myself ready. At some point. And yet, so far, the bride wants to buck and fight and make excuses for why I will not make the decision to get ready. I'm going to just stay like this. I'm going to thrive in my flesh. I'm angry. I'm bitter. I'm upset. I don't like this. I don't like that. Who are you? Are you Elohim? What form of righteousness is that? Does that come from Yahweh? I think not. At some point, we have to decide to make a decision. No more. That's it. I'm done with that game. I played it all my life. I don't want to play it anymore. Game over. There's no guarantee that you're going to wake up tomorrow morning and you're not going to be able to correct it after that. That's it. It's sealed at that point. You're done. You're done. Another concept. This one goes down deep, because this speaks to the men. Think about this and meditate on it. Heal the boy, and the man will eventually appear. Heal the boy, and the man will eventually appear. Now, my wife can give a several-hour testimony about what kind of boy I was when I met her and got married to her, and was for many years. I remained a boy. And when I say that, I mean immature, in the sense that even though I'm a grown man, I don't understand women. I don't understand what their needs are. And I don't understand what Yahweh's mandate was for me as a man and as a husband for my wife. Had no clue. I just thought it was something you fall into. I watch my mother and father. I watch everybody else. They meet a girl. You get married. You have kids. You go to work. You know, all that cliche statements. But boy, that rabbit hole goes down a whole lot more than that. Because at the end of the day, if you can't make your marriage work as the man, and you stop behaving like a boy who's got emotional issues, you're going to have some explaining to do when you get into the kingdom. Because this whole walk with Yahshua is about being a chaste virgin and bride to be for the Messiah. And if you can't do that within your own marriage, how in the world are you going to have a functioning relationship with Yahshua? You can't. That's an oxymoron. It doesn't work. So at some point, a man has to leave his boyhood behind. In other words, his immaturity, the things that a man does when he's a younger man. It means all of the values, bad ones I'm saying, all the values, all the negative emotions, negative behaviors, negative beliefs, all got at some point be left behind. Because at the end of the day, the man who's married in Messiah, his main responsibility is to bring happiness to his wife. And I don't mean that exclusively to the bedroom, because I've heard some men say that. That's not what it's talking about. I'm being a little facetious. But the thing is, what I'm saying is that a man, as Shaul says, husbands, dwell with your wives with understanding. Why? So that you can have a functioning marriage that functions in the environment in which Yahweh created it to function. It's not an easy thing to study a wife. But there came a point where I had to decide that as a believer in Yahshua, my marriage wasn't working. When I was a boy, it was working for me. Because I would just kind of lay down the law, and this is the way it is, and you know, she, being the kind of woman she is, complied. Most of the time, she complied. She did have her lines in the sand, which is fine. But then there came a point where I realized, you know what? As I get older as a man, this boyish nonsense in the marriage, it don't work. There's something wrong. And I realized that if I was going to get rid of the boyishness and the foolishness that boyhood brings into a marriage, I was going to have to study my wife, like Shaul says. And when I set my mind, a decision, remember I was talking about decision? When you get to a point where you realize this don't work anymore, and the light bulb goes off, epiphany happens, and then you set your mind, soul, and spirit, all three together in one, in agreement with the Ruach, which is the will of Yahweh. Abba, I want to understand my wife. Oh, did he not tell me also how to understand my wife? He showed me the deepness of how women think and how they operate. And some women get mad because I pick them apart, and they don't like that. Because women like to stay a mystery and an enigma. They're not. Once Yahweh reveals how they operate, it's not worse than a man. It's not better than a man. It's how Yahweh wired a woman. And he designed both sides to come together so they can be echad, so they can be one. But a man can never be one with his wife if he doesn't study his wife and understand how Yahweh created the woman. It's not his job to be a bully in the house and bully his wife and be a dictator and make his wife to do the things that she really doesn't want to do. Because when a wife does it by faith because she loves her husband and not grudgingly, that's the most beautiful thing that there is. When you got that kind of cooperation. But if you know your wife's doing it because you told her to do it, because you're being that boy, then you know deep down inside as a man, she's only doing it because I'm intimidating her. She's not doing it from her heart. She's doing it out of fear. That's not what you want from your wife. So there comes a point where the boy has to be healed, and so the man can show up. And too many men do not understand what their role is in the body of Messiah in light of their marriage. And they've got to have a paradigm shift. Again, it comes down to a decision. If you're sick and tired of being sick and tired and you want to change, then you decide, I want to change. And I can tell you, you can take it to the bank. When you decide that and Yahweh's convinced that you're convinced, He will make the change happen. It'll come quickly. Because you're removing your flesh out of the way. You're taking the boy and you're putting the boy off to the side. Then the boy can be healed and the man can appear. And that's what the wife's been waiting for all along. So let's look at a negative examples. 1 Corinthians chapter 3. 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 1. It says, "And I, brethren, could not speak to you as to spiritual, as supernatural." And that word spiritual means supernaturally regenerated. Supernaturally regenerated. This is what I'm talking about. When the boy decides he wants to be the man, that's the spiritual regeneration right at that moment. That's when the road changes. And you start going down a different road that gives you a different set of results. People, but as to carnal, as to be babes in Messiah. Another one let's look at. 1 Corinthians chapter 14. 1 Corinthians chapter 14. Verse 20. "Brethren, do not be children as half grown." That's what it means in the Greek. Do not be, in other words, don't be like, if you're speaking to men, don't be a boy. Don't behave like a boy who's half grown, like an adolescent. Boys do boy things. And that's okay when you're a boy. But when you become a man, you got to change your ways. In understanding, however, in malice, be babes, but in understanding, be mature, who are complete in moral character. So what's he saying? What he's saying is, when you leave boyhood behind and you take on the challenge of being a man, you come to a point that's called a complete moral character. A man never discovers who he is as a man as long as he's behaving as a boy. In a marriage context, this is what we're talking about. Proverbs chapter 18. We're going to look at some positive stuff. Proverbs 18:22. "He who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor from Yahweh." Now, some men would disagree with you. They got the wife from hell. But then I would say, a lot of marriage counselings I've done over the years, almost exclusively, with some exceptions, like if you get a woman that's been abused in a lot of ways and has a lot of emotional scars and stuff like that. But I'm not talking about those exceptions. But what I'm talking about in general, most marriage counselings that I've done over the years, the first thing I do is I blame the man. It's not that the wife isn't doing stuff that's wrong. It's not that. But I'm going to look to the man first. Because he's the head of the house. He's the priest of the family. It's his responsibility to dwell with his wife with understanding. And he's basically showing me he don't understand how his wife is constructed. And he's just being a bully and a tyrant. And his wife is miserable. And her spirit is quenched. And he don't understand why. Comply, woman. Comply. No, it's not. She's not an animal. And some men will say, well, doesn't it say in Genesis that the husband will be a bully and a tyrant over the wife? Yeah, it does say that. But that applies to the heathens. We're not heathens. We're supposed to have a regenerated spirit where the love is a fulfillment of the law. Bullying your wife is not fulfilling of the law. Psalms 39, verses 1 through 5. There's blessings in controlling the unruly part of your body, which is your tongue. That's the one that gets us in the most trouble. And so in Psalm chapter 39, verse 1, it says, I said, I will guard my ways, lest I sin with my tongue. I will restrain my mouth with a muzzle, while the wicked are before me. I was mute as tongue-tied with silence that is a quiet trust. Have you ever been in a place where your enemies are against you and Yahweh is not allowing you to respond? Because it's kind of like what Yahweh is saying to you is, they're coming at you, they're doing whatever they're doing, and it's unpleasant, but I won't let you speak because you need to stay out of this. I already got it covered. I don't need your help. Just stay quiet. And with that quietness, he instills a trust that you know that trust, you're going to stand there and you're going to watch some kind of victory in your favor take place. There are moments like that. And you have to recognize when those moments are on you in the midst of when your flesh is being assaulted and your flesh just wants to rise up and wants to have the confrontation. I held my peace, even from good, and my sorrow was stirred up. Verse 3, my heart was hot within me. While I was musing with murmuring complaints, the fire burned. Then I spoke with my tongue. Yahweh, make me to know my end, and what is the measure of my days, that I may know how frail I am. Indeed, you have made my days as handbreadths, and my age is as nothing before you. Certainly, every man at his best state is but a vapor, Selah. So, when you decide to bridle the tongue and hold your tongue and not entertain some of the things that happen in your life, Yahweh blesses you with a spirit of peace and contentment, and he will render your enemies harmless. Here's another concept. And this is the one that constantly causes a problem of the cycle of self-defeat. If it stays in your head, you are dead. If it stays in your head, you are dead. How many of us have the old cassette tapes running in our head that's looping these what do you call it? These statements in your mind, and they loop and they loop and they loop. The good thing about the cassette tapes is you could go back and erase them and put something else over top of something that you didn't like. But we don't do that. We allow that tape to just kind of run and loop itself over and over again, and it's constantly stimulating us to react, to become reactionary and do the same thing over and over again. We've got CDs. Yeah. So if it stays in your head, you are dead. Let's look at James chapter 4, verse 7. James 4:7 says, therefore submit to Elohim, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. So what Yahweh is saying is that you have a responsibility to react in a specific kind of way. But if you don't have that part of your values and part of your belief structure, and that word is not implanted into your soul, the spirit of man, which is the carnal part of man, has its own belief system and its own set of responses that it will have. And the only way you can dominate that is the spirit man himself, the one with the Ruach of Yahweh working with him, must have that word implanted in him that rules over top of the natural man. So you must resist. It's through the flesh that you're going to manifest these things. And that in that moment is when Yahweh is pushed out of the picture. You're on your own at that point. And whatever hell comes your way, you deserve every single bit of it. And now you go back to eating the crow again and spitting out the feathers. And then you say, why did I fall into that trap again? You know why you fall into it? Because you didn't make a decision. You didn't decide that you'd had enough. And I want to change. And I don't want to be plagued by this anymore. Proverbs chapter 8, verse 36. Proverbs 8, 36. But he who sins against me wrongs his own soul. See, when people come against you and they do whatever it is they do, there's any number of things that they can do, and they do it wrongly. If you realize within yourself, it's not my problem, it's their problem. And the reason why you arrive at that conclusion, because it's telling you right there, he who sins against me wrongs his own soul. Now, if I get myself caught up into that drama, now I've inherited the disease as well. But unless you've rooted that concept in your spirit, it will not govern your behavior. It's like I said earlier, your behavior cannot operate independently of your identity. If your identity says, oh, you said that about me? Oh, who the heck do you think you are? And then you start letting loose on them. Now you're part of the problem. You're actually the bigger problem. But if you have the concept in you, oh, bro, you're foolish. You're thinking to yourself, you foolish. I ain't getting caught up in that nonsense. I don't want your disease. That needs to stay over there. All those who hate me love death. Because eventually that malice is hatred. And that hatred is also anger, but that hatred predominantly comes from murder. He's trying to murder me. He's trying to kill me. Which means if he's trying to kill me, he's going to get the death penalty himself. I don't want to go there. Proverbs chapter 14, verse 12. And this is a prevalent one. There is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death. We love to justify why we do what we do. We love to give ourselves reasons and excuses for why we think and feel the way that we do. And quite frankly, Yahweh is basically saying, I could give a damn one way or the other the way you feel. It's not justifiable. You don't even understand what you're even dealing with. Furthermore, you don't even come to me to ask me to explain to you what the real deal is, what's really going on. And you've already concocted in your own mind and responded in your own way what you think is running down the hill. And it could be further from that. So, let's move on to the next concept. Progress equals happiness. Progress equals happiness. If you are unhappy, it's because you are not progressing. Man was inherently designed that man is a creator. If you look at Yahweh, Yahweh is a creator. That's part of his nature. He creates things. He makes things happen. His word says, my word does not go out from me and return back void. Everything that goes out from his mouth returns back fulfilled. That's what makes him happy. He's a creator. We've been made in his image according to his likeness, which means we are creators also. He's given us certain powers to create, whether it's to create another human being, whether it's to create, like my wife likes to do, she likes to paint, so she creates scenes on a canvas, or whatever the case may be. The point is that he is a creator by nature. Now, if we all sat around and we had no creative power whatsoever, we would be totally bored out of our minds. We're not like the animal realm. So, man is most happiest when he is progressing. That means you must be continually in a state of mind in which you are asking Yahweh for things to be happening in your life. And then as you see them unfolding in your life and manifesting in your life, it juices you. It increases your faith. It increases your worth within the family of Yahweh. In Job chapter 5, verse 17, Job 5:17, it says, behold, happy is the man whom Elohim corrects and reproves. Oh, now, wait a minute, John. I wasn't buying into that one. I got enough of that going on in my life right now. I thought you were going to read some text, about blessings and miracles and all that kind of stuff. But he's telling us that you're happy, you're supposed to be happy when you're being corrected. That's a leap, because that means you have to really crucify the flesh, because the flesh does not like being corrected by Yahweh. But in order to get to the point where you actually are happy that you're being corrected, means you must embrace something beyond the level of the flesh. And what does that mean? It means this is the concept. I decide to embrace it, or I decide to reject. That's it. It's that simple. You're either going to accept and embrace the fact that when correction comes, you accept it, and you're going to be happy about it, because you know it's going to bring what? A peaceable fruit into your life. That's what the scripture says. But if you reject it, then the cursings come in, and you become more of a glutton for punishment. Again, it keeps coming down to a decision. What do you want? You want to stay in your misery, or do you want to be liberated from your misery? One or the other. You want victory, or you continue to want to suffer the defeats? You want your head hanging up high, or you want to be looking down low to the ground? For each of us, we have to make these decisions based on where you are at this time in your life. Therefore, do not despise the chastening of the Almighty, for he bruises, but he binds up. And that word binds in the Hebrew means to take like a bandage and wrap a wound so that it can get healed. He wounds, his hands makes whole. He shall deliver you in 6 troubles, yes, in 7 no evil shall touch you. Now this is if you embrace that concept of chastening now and correction. These are the benefits that come if you accept that. But if you don't accept it, then it's the opposite. You shall be hidden from the scourge of the tongue. You shall not be afraid of destruction when it comes. You shall laugh at destruction and famine, and you shall not be afraid of the beasts of the earth. Let's take a look at Philippians chapter 1, verse 25. Philippians 1:25. And being confident of this, I know that I shall remain and continue with you for all your progress and joy of faith. Here you go. Progress. This made him happy to see their progress, which is of joy and of faith. He's seeing a fruit developing within the congregation that is progress. That means the work that was being done was not for nothing. And that your rejoicing for me may be more abundant in Yahshua HaMashiach by my coming to you again. 1 Timothy chapter 4. 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 13. Here's another example of progress. Till I come, give attention to reading, to exhortation, and to doctrine. Do not neglect the gift that is in you, which was given to you by the prophecy with laying on of hands of the eldership. Meditate on these things, give yourself entirely to them, that your progress that brings advancement, that's what it means in the Greek, that progress brings advancement may be evident to everyone, to all. So progress is a prerequisite to advancement. Take heed to yourself and to the doctrine, continue in them, for in doing this you will save both yourself and those who hear you. Now, another concept that we need to get a hold of. Wherever focus goes, energy flows. Wherever focus goes, energy flows. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is you were created to change the atmosphere. You can walk into an atmosphere where there's gloominess And you can succumb to the gloominess, or you can be completely separate from it. Even if they don't want to take on a different spirit, it doesn't have to affect you. It's kind of like what Sharon was saying when she went with her friends to the restaurant and they were doing the things they were doing. It had no bearing on her. Wherever focus goes, energy flows. So if you decide to be angry, bitter, upset, you're going to infect everybody else around you. Whatever you set your mind, again, we're talking about a decision. If you decide, this is what I'm going to entertain, you will then change the atmosphere to mimic exactly what your spirit is, if yours is the dominating spirit in the room. You were chosen to change the atmosphere. Question is, what's your mindset? What is your decision? What is your focus? These are things that we have to think about as we are believers in the Messiah. Because all these things change the events and the quality of life that you have around you based upon which decision do I make. So let's look at a negative example of this. Proverbs chapter 29, verse 12. Proverbs 29:12. If a ruler pays attention to lies, all his servants become wicked. There you go. Where energy flows, that's where it goes. 1 Timothy chapter 6. 1 Timothy chapter 6. If anyone teaches otherwise and does not consent to wholesome words, even the words of our Master Yahshua, Hamashiach, and to the doctrine which accords with holiness, he is proud, enveloped with smoke as self-conceited. That's what that word proud means. In other words, he's got so much smoke around him, he can't see anything but himself. There is no other world besides him. He's self-centered. Knowing nothing, but is obsessed with a diseased appetite, with disputes and arguments over words from which come envy, ill-willed distractions, strife, quarreling, reveling, evil suspicions, useless wranglings of men, of corrupt as rotted through minds, and destitute that is kept back by fraud of the truth, who suppose that holiness is a means of gain, a money-making acquisition. Boy, that sounds a lot like the body of Messiah today. You got all these guys out there making money from this. Making videos, DVDs, books, conferences, and they're charging up the yin-yang for this stuff, and they're living good. And yet, a believer who may be poor, can't afford $120 for a DVD set, will never have access to the Word of Yahweh and whatever that teaching is, because that teacher needs to make his money. That's the word gain. A money-making acquisition. From such, withdraw yourself. Let's look at a positive example. Wherever energy focus goes, energy flows. Make sure you understand what state you're in. Is it a negative energy or is it a positive energy? Is it from the evil one or from Yahweh? And depending on that will determine what is about to happen in this next set of events. Acts chapter 3, verse 2. Acts 3:2. A certain man, lame from his mother's womb, was carried, whom they laid daily at the gate of the temple, which is called Beautiful, to ask alms from those who entered the temple, who, seeing Peter and John about to go into the temple, asked for alms. And fixing his eyes on him, with John Peter said, "Look at us." So he gave them his attention, expecting to receive something from them. Then Peter said, "Silver and gold I do not have, but what I do have I give to you. In the name of Yahshua HaMashiach of Nazareth, rise up and walk." And he took him by the right hand and lifted him up, and immediately his feet and ankle bones received strength. So he leaped up, stood and walked and entered the temple with them, walking, leaping, and praising Elohim. So his energy flow was completely different. He was looking for something. He was looking for alms. Probably didn't even cross his mind he'd ever be healed. But there was something in that moment when the apostle told him to look at him and get fixed, to get focused. This is what I'm talking about. What are you focusing on? That's what we have to ask ourselves. I ask myself that over and over again. What am I focused on? Is it the right thing? Is it going to give me the desired result? Or is it going to give me the wrong result? If it's the wrong result, get your mind off of that and change your focus. It's not going to benefit you. All you're doing is reinforcing the bad behavior that's got you where you are in the first place. Every time you entertain it and you don't put a stop to it, and you don't have this policy of the buck stops with me, you're reinforcing the negative behavior. And you won't allow the nature of Yahweh to be written into your spirit. And instead, like I told them up there when I spoke a few weeks ago, that the spirit of lawlessness is moving into your holy holies. And the man of sin is sitting in your temple. And therefore Yahweh can't dwell there. And if Yahweh ain't dwelling there, it's just a physical building that's trying to look like Yahweh is there, but Yahweh's not there. Dangerous place to be. Another concept. Activity without purpose is a drain on life and fortune. Activity without purpose is a drain on life and fortune. What do I mean by that? There are many of us, and sometimes I have to watch myself also, that you don't get so caught up in life with routine and doing the things that you like to do, but there's really no purpose behind it. You're just going through the motions. You know, I'm not talking about like when you got to take care of your wife, you got to take care of your family, you got to go to work. Those things you got to do. That's not what I'm talking about. But there's things, and I catch myself, sometimes I get so overwhelmed with so many things in this life that sometimes it's just like I tell my wife, I want to come home and I need my brain to unwind. Give me an hour or so. I just want my brain to unwind. So sometimes I'll click on and I'll watch maybe Outer Limits. You know, or the old sci-fi, black and white sci-fi. It's just an hour or so, and you know, yeah, I remember watching that. That was pretty cool. And then, you know, then it's back to work, you know. But sometimes you got to unwind, but you can't stay stuck in that kind of stuff, because life is more than work. Life is more than eating. Life is more than even just pleasure. Life consists of many different things. So activity without purpose is a drain on life and fortune. So if you're doing a bunch of things, I remember many years ago, just before I became a believer actually, I was very ill at the time, and I was looking to get away from work and all kinds of stuff like that. And I used to spend my time with these guys who were proposing a business deal. And it would have gone national, and you know, it looked like it was kind of going in a good direction. And we used to spend every day over by the docks, having lunch, sitting around. Well, they would drink beer. I don't drink beer, but I would sit around having sodas, and we'd talk all afternoon. And it felt good to sit there and talk all afternoon about the plans we were going to do. Well, after about 4 months, the money dried up and they were gone. So I had 4 months of having fun sitting at the docks at the restaurant there, you know, and eating and having fun with these guys and talking dreams and stuff. But guess what? I lost 4 months of income. And my business continued to slide down the tubes. So, you know, you've got to have a purpose. If you got to go have a business meeting every now and then and have lunch, fine. After an hour or two, go back to work. But I was looking to escape from work. See, I was being honest with myself. I didn't want to be at work. Because every day that I was at work, whenever the phone rang, it was a bill collector. Because the business was collapsing. And I want to answer the phone because I didn't want to have to give excuses why I can't pay the bill. So I was squandering my time like the wicked servant who was burying his money in the ground, and it wasn't doing anything, and he's a wicked and lazy servant. Anyway, let's look at Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 17. Ecclesiastes 3:17. It says, I said in my heart, Elohim shall judge the righteous and the wicked, for there is a time there. There's a time there for every purpose and for every work. I said in my heart, concerning the condition of the sons of men, Elohim tests them, that they may see that they themselves are like animals. And that's the thing. When you come to Messiah, you have to have a purpose. You're not just sitting on your blessed assurance every day, not having a purpose. Oh, Yahweh, thank you for getting me out of bed today. Baruch Hashem Yahweh. That can't be your purpose. Your purpose is to get washed by the Word, to pray, and whatever Yahweh is leading in, developing that relationship. That's your purpose. It's not about squandering your day away watching TV or whatever else you do. A little bit, okay, I can understand that. But there's got to be more to life than that, because every minute you steal away from this, your clock is ticking down. That's a decision. The flesh wants to be entertained with things of this world that have absolutely nothing to do with the eternalness of your life, except in the sense that it's stealing from you. Every day it's making a withdrawal from you. If you don't see it that way, it's to your own detriment. So we have to be careful about how much emphasis we put on things in this life that really are detriment to us. It's like Yahshua says, you cannot serve two masters. You either love one or you hate the other. I said him, okay, let's see, I read that. Okay, verse 19. For what happens to the sons of men also happens to animals, and one thing befalls them. As one dies, so dies the other. Surely they all have one breath. Man has no advantage of superiority over the animals, for all is vanity and full of emptiness. All go to one place, as then condition of the body and mind. All are from the dust, all return to the dust. Who knows the spirit of the sons of men, which goes upward, and the spirit of the animal, which goes downward? Now, what we know from Scripture is that when a human dies, it says, and his spirit returns to the one who gave it. It doesn't mean he's alive. It doesn't mean he's in a conscious state. It just means the breath of life, which is the intellect, but it doesn't have a body, goes back, and it's inanimate. That's what it's talking about. And the animal doesn't. His breath of life stays here. It just goes away. It just dies. And goes down to the earth. So I perceive that nothing is better than that a man should rejoice in his own works, for that is his heritage. And this is what I'm trying to get across. Every day that goes by, the older you're getting, the advantage of getting older is you realize the clock is ticking down and you have less time for foolishness. I have no more time for foolishness. I'm 63 going on 64. My perspective today of where I am in my walk with Yahshua is very different than it was a month ago. And every day that goes by, I realize I do not have as much liberty of time, whether in my physical health, my mental health, my strength and capacity to do what Yahweh's given me to do. So, time becomes of the essence. You don't squander it. You look at these people that win these lottos. I think there's a statistic that kind of basically says that these people win these millions of dollars. Within 2 years, the money's gone. Because they don't know how to handle what they got. They're used to handling a $100 bill, but not millions. They didn't earn it. And so they squander it instead of wisely using it. Well, time is also like money as well. You can't redeem back the time in that kind of a context. So you need to use your time, whatever you got left, to do the best you can with what you got and make it worth something. Here's another concept. Nothing in life has any meaning except the meaning you give to it. Nothing in life has any meaning except the meaning you give to it. You either give something credibility or you don't. If you get a credibility, that takes you down this road. If you don't give a credibility, it prevents you from going down that road. Again, it's a decision. When you are confronted with something, what meaning do you give to that situation? How do you interpret what is happening to you in that moment? In Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 20, it says, when your son asks you in time to come, saying, what is the meaning of the testimonies, the statutes, and the judgments which Yahweh our Elohim has commanded you? Then you shall say to your son, we were slaves of Pharaoh. See, he's giving him a meaning. This wasn't, when we came out of Egypt, it wasn't for nothing. It wasn't just a bad experience. Yeah, it was a bad experience, but it was meant for something good. And here's what it is. And you're supposed to pass that down generation to generation so that Hasatan doesn't supplant that concept with a negative concept, then instituting generational curses. So that the rest of those genealogies coming down live with those curses. We were slaves, Pharaoh in Egypt, and Yahweh brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand. And Yahweh showed signs as a miraculous signal and wonders before our eyes, great and severe, against Egypt, Pharaoh, and all his household. Then he brought us out from there that he might bring us in to give us a land which he swore to our fathers. So here's the benefit. Here's the difficult part. And then the end result is we got blessed. It wasn't for nothing. There was a reason for this to happen. And you're instilling this into those generations. And Yahweh commanded us to observe all these statutes, to fear Yahweh our Elohim, for our good always. See, for our good. He doesn't mean to do us harm, he means to do us good. But we want to harm ourselves because we won't make the decision to stop the craziness. I won't make the decision. I've always been this way. I've never seen it change. It's never gotten any better. Every time I try to put my foot forward, somebody steps on it and it sends me backwards. Well, then maybe your faith and your conviction is not strong enough. Like Zacchaeus. Remember? Come hell or high water, he was going to get to the Messiah. And ain't nobody was going to stop him. Do you have that kind of intention? Do you have that kind of intensity of belief? That he might preserve us alive as it is this day. Then it will be righteousness for us if we are careful to observe, as a hedge of thorns, as a protection, all these commandments before Yahweh our Elohim, as he has commanded us. So, in concluding, what I'm saying is that we need challenges in life to elevate your faith to a whole nother level. If you don't have challenges and you don't meet those challenges, your faith cannot and will not elevate to another level. We need to change how we see the challenges that come in our life. It's very, very important. And that's why I'm asking from the beginning, what meaning do you apply to your life? These various things that you're going through, what does it mean to you? How are you interpreting it? And if you're not interpreting it the right way, once you've interpreted it the right way, what will be your decision? Because that is the moment of truth. In that moment, Yahweh knows whether you are going along with his plan or you're going to continue on your plan. Only one plan can be carried out. And each one of those decisions takes you down a different road. Your past doesn't have to equal your future. You don't have to relegate yourself to living the same way in the past in the future. Your past can change. Your future can change if you change the meaning to how you see these events and how they apply to your life. Amen? Let's close in prayer. Holy Abba, Father, we just want to bless you and thank you again for your goodness, your kindness, your mercy, your compassion. We thank you how your word is watering to our soul and to our spirit, Abba, and to our minds, and how your word illustrates these various concepts, Abba, that we've erroneously inherited from our forefathers. And so, Abba, I know that you are taking us on a path through the wilderness of helping us to see that we need to leave these lies of our forefathers behind. We've been dealt terrible blows in our life, all of us in a little bit of a different way, but all at the same time, it's all one and the same. Because at the end of the day, whether this person has this issue or that person has another issue, it still comes down to a fact that today we have to decide. We have to decide, Abba, whether or not we're going to do it your way or we're going to continue to do it our way. And Abba, Father, in front of us is the road that's a narrow road. It's the road that leads to life. Help us to decide to take the narrow road, the narrow path that leads to life in Yahshua HaMashiach, and not the broad way that most everybody else is going in that leads to death. Bless your people, Abba. Encourage them, strengthen them to do the right thing, to come to grips with themselves, to challenge themselves, and believe and see that you are capable of taking them out of the circumstances, not all at once, but each miracle will be a step-by-step process, Abba, until you have completed your work inside them. In Yahshua's mighty name, amen.